In 71 seconds, Jasmine Crockett tore open a sealed contract, blood red ink, Vance's signature, and one or the 842 families erased. JD face twisted on live TV. He slammed his fist, pointed at her, and roared, "I'll sue you for this." But Jasmine didn't flinch. She just flipped to page 2. What was on that second made America forget to breathe. The lights burned white hot across debate stage, but real heat came from J.D. Vance's voice as it sliced through the air like a rusted blade. "This isn't housing policy," he spat, his face twisted with performative indignation. "This is dangerous racial propaganda." He jabbed a finger across the desk toward Jasmine Crockett, eyes narrowed, voice rising over the stunned murmurs of live audience. CNN's ticker crawled silently beneath the screen. Live national housing policy debate, but no one was reading now. All eyes were on her. Jasmine didn't blink. Her hand remained flat on the polished table, other resting gently a folder of census reports and eviction stats. She stared at JD, not with anger, but something colder, deeper. Disappointment. The kind that doesn't erupt, but simmers until it scorches everything in its path. The moderator stammered, attempting to regain control. But JD was already on a roll. You cite numbers from one zip code in Atlanta and pretend it's a national crisis. That's not policy, it's race baiting. The studio was frozen. Even camera rails hesitated. Somewhere in dark, a sound engineer muttered, "Did he really just say that Jasmine finally moved, but not fast?" She straightened her back, adjusted the mic clip to lapel, and lifted a single sheet of paper. It was worn at the edges, ink slightly faded, but header was clear. U.S. Housing and Urban Development, Emergency Eviction Report, Q1. Her voice came low, measured. Senator Vance, when a black mother in Detroit is 5 times more likely to be evicted than a white counterpart in the same income bracket, that's not propaganda. A policy failure. She placed the paper down deliberately, then slid forward a second document. This one, printed just hours ago, subpoenaed internal memo from private equity firm J.D. Vance's top donor, highlighted in red, targeted eviction strategy based on non-voting minority density. J.D. flinched. A ripple of energy cracked across the room like storm rolling in. He tried to recover. "That memo means nothing. You're twisting corporate language to stir racial division on national television." Jasmine didn't flinch. She leaned in just slightly, the corners of her mouth unmoving. "You're right. Language matters. Like the you used 2 months ago in Columbus, calling these same neighborhoods, quote, non-productive zones." She clicked a remote under the desk. Screen behind them lit up. Video played, time-stamped, and authenticated. His voice echoed across the room. "We need to rethink investing in non-productive zones. These areas are culturally bankrupt." The audience gasped. JD's smile froze halfway between smug and stunned. Cameras locked in, one on Jasmine's face, calm, relentless. JD eyes darting jaw, tightening sweat, pulling just under his collar. She wasn't yelling. Didn't need to. Reached for one last document, still sealed, marked confidential in bold red, and placed it on the desk right beside her untouched glass of water. The paper pulsed like a heartbeat. Her eyes never left him. "I haven't even opened this one yet," she said softly, "but it came from a whistleblower in your office." The silence that followed was not peace. The sound of an empire cracking. What could possibly silence a senator mid-broadcast? The crowd was still on fire when Jasmine stepped off stage. News anchors scrambled in whispers. Interns texted like their fingers were on fire. J.D. Vance hadn't spoken in the last 7 minutes of broadcast. His eyes had gone glassy. But now, in silence of hallway behind stage, all noise vanished, replaced by something colder. A voice sliced through it. "You just made a whole lot of enemies." It came from her left, Congressman Lyle Danner, blue tie, gray morals. He stepped in close, two like they were co-conspirators. His voice was low, but sharp enough to draw blood. "You embarrassed a sitting senator on national television. You think that's going to help our side?" Jasmine didn't flinch. "I'm not here sides," she said. "People." He gave a tight smile, the kind that never reached eyes. "Then don't dig into Vance's land ties. Trust me, that rabbit hole leads to places you don't want to see." And just like that, he was gone. No goodbye, follow-up, a warning dressed in civility. She stood there, still heels, mic makeup, her heart pounding. Something had shifted. She could feel it. The moment on stage wasn't just a viral moment. It was trigger. Back in the green room, AC buzzed like a dying fly. Her bag sat untouched on the leather chair, but someone had been here. She could tell the bottled water hadn't opened, had moved two in. On the table, a plain manila envelope, no name, return address. Just wait. She opened it slowly. Inside, 4 photocopied pages, classified internal memos. 1. A zoning map of Ohio's District 14 redlined like war zone. Entire blocks marked redevelopment priority, all of them black neighborhoods. Beside it, a PDF print out of an email chain. The sender, financeacrfpack.com. Subject clearing block Q2 targets. Attachments made her stomach twist. A spreadsheet of eviction addresses matched with donation tallies from J.D. Vance's Super PAC. Then came the last page. A memo signed off by developer group named Thorn and Crest. At the bottom in bold ink, all purchases are contingent on pre-vote eviction clearance. It wasn't just unethical, was criminal. Someone using Senate votes to wipe neighborhoods clean, then sell the land J.D. Vance's backers at half price. Her hands trembled, but not from fear, rage. This wasn't politics. Was a cartel wrapped in flag. She stared at the envelope again. Who sent it? Her mind raced back to the debate hallway. A young woman barely more than teenager. Red notebook, shaking hands. Jasmine remembered the look in her eyes when she offered a napkin earlier. Too purposeful to be an accident. She tucked something inside, a word scribbled in blue pen. Careful. That staffer knew something, and she had just risked her entire future to warn Jasmine. But why? Why her? Now? Jasmine pulled out her phone, heart pounding, and recorded a single voice memo. This goes deeper than Vance. Is systemic. Bought silence. And someone just handed me proof. She stared at her reflection in the mirror across room. Own face looked different now, not from makeup, but what she knew, couldn't unknow. This wasn't about debates anymore. Was a war waged with eviction notices instead of bullets in the paper trail that proved it. And biggest question in her mind refused to go quiet. Why would someone risk everything, just hand her the fuse? Next broadcast wasn't supposed to be confrontational, just a follow-up interview, cleanup segment, something the network called post-debate reflections. But Jasmine Crockett didn't come to reflect. She came finish what started. The lights clicked on. Anchor smiled wide, reading from teleprompter. J.D. Vance sat across her, more guarded, now hands clenched under the table. His smirk was thinner, calculated, like a man trying to hold damn with his bare hands. Jasmine leaned back, eyes calm, but her fingers tapped slow and steady on a blue folder resting in her lap. Nobody noticed it at first. The producers didn't catch label. Camera crew had no idea what was coming, but she knew the exact second to open it. Right when JD launched into his usual monologue about revitalizing neglected zones, cutting red tape, bringing business back to underserved areas. That's when she did it. Placed the folder on table. Neat, deliberate. JD's eyes flicked toward it, then back to her. She didn't smile, just flipped it open. The microphone caught sound, sharp electric-like strike of a match. Inside single-page contract, paper thick and slightly yellowed at edges. Top, embossed in faint silver, Vance Capital Holdings, LLC. Across the middle, title in bold black ink, Urban Redevelopment Strategic Plan, Phase 3. At the bottom, 3 signatures JD Vance's name, etched in hard, slanted strokes, underlined once blood-red ink. Above it, a small notary seal shimmered under the studio lights. Camera zoomed in. Audience saw it too. His signature, ink, deal. The anchor faltered mid-quest. Congresswoman, is that Jasmine slid document forward, a redevelopment agreement for zip code 43211, signed and dated 6 months ago by Mr. Vance's private investment firm. JD didn't speak. Not yet. Jasmine continued, her voice smooth as steel. This zip code is 70% black. The eviction rate there doubled in same quarter this contract was signed. Coincidence? Camera zoomed in like a sniper lens. You could see it. His left cheek twitched twice, then locked. A muscle spasm beneath the eyes, sharp and uncontrolled. Beads of sweat glistened at his hairline. Tongue pressed once to the inside of cheek could tell. Kind twitch poker players know means caught. That betrays a man before he even opens his mouth. This isn't about policy, she said. It's profit. People being pushed out so corporations can move in. And Senator Vance, well, he's not just voting on it. Cashing in JD finally spoke, but too late. That document means nothing, he snapped, leaning forward. My investments are in a blind trust. Everyone knows that. Jasmine met his gaze with fire behind her eyes. Then you won't mind if I submit it into the congressional record. Anchor froze. Control room didn't know what to do. This wasn't in the rundown. A producer's voice cracked through earpiece. Go to commercial now. Screen blinked, cut black, but damage was done. Jasmine leaned back in her chair as makeup artists rushed the set. JD was already reaching for his phone, whispering to aid with a clenched jaw. He wouldn't look at her. Didn't have to because everyone had already seen what mattered. A name, date, neighborhood carved like meat, and signature that didn't lie. But the question clung to silence between them like smoke in air. Was that fear or fury? By 2:01 a.m., world outside Jasmine's window was asleep, but her kitchen lit like an interrogation room. The contract sat on her table, mocking with every neatly folded crease. It looked harmless, polished, sanitized, but inside read like a blueprint for erasure. She ran her finger under each phrase slowly, as if peeling back skin. Demographic revitalization, strategic tenant churn, wealth migration corridors. These weren't just euphemisms. They were weapons dressed in business casual, aimed not at buildings, but the people inside them. Zip code 43211. That number came up over and again. It wasn't random, was targeted. The neighborhood's profile majority black, low-income, high rental density made it the perfect prey. She circled address line with a red pen, her hand's steady pulse anything but next to the contract. A second screen glowed. Vance Growth Partners, JD's former fund, had scrubbed its site clean, but archive links never lied. She found old brochures, LinkedIn posts, even a speech he gave on the opportunity of undervalued zones. Opportunity, that word again. Then she saw it. May 3rd, JD officially stepped down as managing partner. The same week, first eviction letters were sent out in 43211. The signature on redevelopment contract dated May 6th, 3 days later. He didn't get out before the fire, lit match, and walked away. Jasmine sat back in her chair, eyes locked on the screen. This wasn't coincidence. It was choreography. He had orchestrated a perfect exit just early enough to claim ignorance, late profit. It wasn't shady, was surgical. She turned back to the contract and reread a section labeled Asset Conversion Timeline. Hidden inside the table was a clause linking project to shell firm Thorne and Crest, Delaware LLC, the same name that appeared on 2 other documents buried in her earlier leak. It all lined up now: the firm, evictions, passy money, silence. Nobody read this contract because it was supposed to. It wasn't designed to inform, conceal. Jasmine underlined the phrases one by one, speaking them out loud just to hear the venom behind velvet. Demographic correction, predictive exit strategies. It made her sick. She reached for recorder. Zip code 43211, Vance Capital, Thorne and Crest. Blind, trust my ass, she muttered, hitting record. This wasn't a debate anymore. It was heist, but instead of ski masks and crowbars, they used spreadsheet signatures. No one batted an eye. Jasmine stood, grabbed the contract, and slid it into a fireproof folder marked for committee review. Her fingers paused before zipping it shut. Why did he step down? Right the evictions began, air in Columbus wasn't cold, but it carried weight. A kind of silence that came after everything familiar had been ripped away. Jasmine Crockett stepped out of the rental car and into zip code 43211, not as a politician, but witness. Block after looked like memory wiped clean. Empty lots, boarded windows, playgrounds without children. She walked past the hollow shell of a corner store. Mural still clung to the side-faded blues and golds of a grandmother holding child. The store had served this neighborhood for 30 years now. It was marked pending demolition. Jasmine felt the weight of that word pending, like a threat still echoing through every crack in the sidewalk. Her first stop was a 1-story house with plastic bags stuffed in the windows to block draft. An elderly woman sat on porch in a folding chair. Her name was Miss Evelyn Ward, 82, retired public school teacher. Jasmine introduced herself and asked if she could sit. Miss Ward didn't hesitate. I lived in that house over there, she said, pointing to a fenced-off lot across the street. 42 years, raised 2 sons, survived cancer, voted in every election. Then one day, the landlord sold building. I got a letter, said had 60 days to disappear. Her voice didn't break, but hands trembled when she pulled out the eviction notice from a purse held together with safety pins. Jasmine read the name in corner. Thorne and Crest Redevelopment Partners, same company from contract. She looked up. Did they offer you anything? A buyout? Place to go? Ms. Ward shook her head. They offered me a pamphlet. That was it. Said I could apply for new housing once construction's done, but won't live long enough to see a damn thing built. Sharp ache stabbed Jasmine's chest. She thanked Ms. Ward and promised to come back with something more than words. 2 streets down, a group of teens kicked gravel in an empty parking lot. One them, thin, tall with a scar just above his eyebrow, watched her carefully. She approached, introduced herself, and asked if he lived nearby. Used to, said. Now we crash at my cousin's. Told her his name was Terrence, 17. Jasmine asked if he missed old home. Looked away, jaw tight. then spoke without blinking. They tore down my home for someone who never lived here. The sentence hung in air like a blade. He went on, said his mom used to work nights at the clinic. Little sister used to ride her bike in the alley. Now it's fenced up like we were never here. Just noise. Jasmine nodded, unable to speak, her throat locked. Because Terrence was right. This wasn't just about land. It was memory, community, names scratched out of history by people who never even bothered to learn them. As she returned her car, looked back one more time, Terrence raised a hand, not to wave, but point where his house once stood. Nothing remained but gravel and rebar. She got in, closed the door, whispered to herself, "How many voices must be erased before someone listens?" The email landed at 12:04 a.m. No subject line, sender name, just one sentence typed in black Arial on a blank white screen. Withdraw your claim or face consequences. Jasmine stared at it, her hand frozen above the trackpad, heart thudding like it already knew this wasn't just politics anymore. She'd expected pushback, maybe a smear piece, cold call from some lobbyist with fake smile and real money. But this wasn't that. Was the kind of message you send when someone's getting too close. The kind you don't sign because know you've already crossed a line. Her eyes flicked toward the muted TV still glowing in corner. Fox News rerun of J.D. Vance's latest appearance. His voice oozed through the speakers like syrup poured over gasoline. Certain radical members of Congress, he said, have chosen to defame private citizens with unproven accusations. I'm currently in talks legal counsel. We're considering a defamation suit. He didn't need to say her name. The whole country knew who he meant. Jasmine reached for remote and turned volume up one notch. JD leaned forward in his chair, the studio lights gleaming off cufflinks. When politicians start fabricating scandals to tear down their opponents, it's not just unethical, criminal, he said with that performative concern wore like a tailored suit. It's time we hold them accountable. She watched his smile freeze just a half second too long. There it was, fear dressed up as outrage. She opened her laptop, dragging files across screen like soldiers into position. The redevelopment contract, 43211 zoning map, lease termination letters with thorn and crest letterheads, her notes from Columbus, names, dates, addresses. She clicked through one by one, checking every timestamp like a prosecutor assembling her case. JD wanted to make story disappear beneath a mountain of subpoenas and press conferences. He thought the courtroom could break her where politics had failed. But what he didn't understand, never would, was that Jasmine hadn't started this fight for airtime. She, Evelyn Ward, Terrence, every family boxed out of their own lives while men in suits called it revitalization. Another buzz from her phone, a second email, this time Chief of Staff. Fox News segments gone viral. Lines are jammed. Legal team wants to brief you at 8 a.m. sharp. She didn't respond. Instead, reached for her recorder, held it up to lips, and spoke quietly. If they think suing me will scare me, they've never seen what happens when the truth gets cornered. She clicked save. This wasn't a fight wanted, but it was one born for. Still, as sat in the silence, threat echoing her mind, a question began to press harder than all the rest. Not legal, political, something deeper. What happens when telling the truth becomes a legal liability? Headline hit just after 9:07 a.m. CNN and interrupted live coverage with a pulsing red banner. Breaking J.D. Vance files defamation suit against Repo's Jasmine Crockett. The anchor's voice dropped half an octave thick with drama. Sources confirm the senator accuses Ripper Crockett of character assassination and public defamation in connection to recent televised statements involving a redevelopment scandal. Jasmine's phone vibrated nonstop, 10 missed calls, 14 new messages. She sat at her desk, staring the screen. News still unfolding in real time. Her office moments ago, filled with quiet focus, now buzzed like a disturbed hive. Staffers spilled into the hallway, whispering hard phones, huddling around open laptops. One aide peeked her office with wide eyes, holding a freshly printed copy of the court filing. Jasmine raised a hand, firm and calm, closed the door. Lawsuit was 43 pages of calculated outrage. It accused her intentional misrepresentation, reckless disregard for truth, and malicious conduct with intent to defame. It referenced specific phrases from her CNN interview, time-stamped, highlighted, stripped of all context, turned into weapons. J.D. Vance wasn't just pushing back, he was declaring war. Her chief counsel arrived within the hour, briefcase in hand, eye steady. He tossed the complaint on her table like it was a menu. He's bluffing. You rattled the cage, now trying to play courtroom theater. Jasmine didn't smile. She just asked one question. Can we hold the line? Lawyer nodded. Already are. They reviewed evidence again. Slow, methodical, signed redevelopment contract, matching eviction timeline, leaked email about demographic revitalization. They weren't rumors. Theories were facts. JD could file a 100 pages, but not one would erase the truth on those documents. Still, pressure was rising. Journalists were calling non-stop. JD's team had already scheduled an exclusive with Fox News for the evening broadcast. His spokesperson released a statement calling Jasmine radical firebrand pushing lies for political gain. The story was snowballing, headlines outpacing facts, perception bending reality. But Jasmine didn't flinch. She'd seen this tactic before. Smear, sue, suppress. Create enough noise to drown the truth. Frame accountability as attack. Turn exposure into victimhood. But she also knew what fear looked like when it addressed itself in legal briefs. As the team mapped out their response strategy, her phone buzzed again. A text from trusted journalist. Off record, Vance just hired an opposition firm to dig into your personal life. They're playing dirty. Jasmine stared at the message, then locked her phone without replying. So that's where they were now. She walked to the window and looked out at gray morning sky over Capitol Hill. Storm was here, but she wasn't backing down because this just about her anymore. It was every name already erased from those maps, every voice they thought wouldn't fight back. And as her team prepared the press response, one question hung heavier than any headline. Was this about protecting his reputation or bearing the truth before country could hear it scream? Email came through encrypted. No name, signature, just a single line in the subject box. I used to work for him. Need talk. Jasmine stared at the screen for a long second, heart thutooing. She'd seen anonymous tips before some helpful most noise, but something about this one felt heavier. Her team traced the IP burner account, public Wi-Fi wiped metadata. Whoever sent it knew what they were doing. Jasmine replied, "Anyway, short and direct. Where, when?" The response came 3 minutes later. A diner outside D.C. 2 nights from now. No phone calls, press. She arrived early. Rain hit the windows and sheets, making booth feel like a confessional. Man walked in late, soaked, hunched, wearing a ball cap and glasses that didn't quite fit. He looked like every man and no one all at once. He slid into the seat without a word, pulled folder from under his jacket, and placed it on the table between them, like weighed more than paper. I was an accountant for Vance Growth Partners, he said. His voice was low, brittle, like it hadn't been used in weeks. I did the filings, donor reports, redevelopment paperwork, all of it. Jasmine didn't speak. She just listened. He opened the folder and flipped through a stack of documents, donation ledgers, disbursement memos. Line items marked community engagement initiatives, but the money never touched any community. It was rerouted quietly to PAC donors under a different name. They called it development incentives, as he said, but was payback. Contracts were awarded to donors after eviction clearances. We inflated consulting fees, mass reimbursements. I signed them. Jasmine's stomach turned. How many? She asked. Dozens of transactions, maybe more. Some passed through shell orgs, others got bundled into outreach budgets. But the money always found its way back to same hands. He handed her a page circled in red ink. $250 consulting payment to firm registered in Nevada, the same that showed up on J.D. Vance's campaign finance reports. He rubbed his face, hand shaking. I wanted to come clean a year ago, but they have NDAs, lawyers, people who vanish when you ask too many questions. Jasmine leaned in. Why now? He stared out the window for a long time before answering. I saw you on CNN and what they're doing to Now, smearing you, suing you. I couldn't sit with it anymore. Didn't just cook numbers. Helped hide a machine built to erase people. The rain outside thickened. Air between them felt electric. Jasmine flipped through the pages again, her eyes burning. This was it. Paper trail no one else could get. Proof that evictions weren't just a consequence. They were currency, and the system was rigged from inside. She looked back at man who now sat with his head in hands, like he just confessed to a priest. One man, confession, and possibly the crack in armor that no lawsuit could fix. But question now hung between them, heavier than folder, sharper fear. Can one man's conscience take down a senator's career? The next morning, Jasmine walked into her legal team's war room with a calm they hadn't seen in days. No headlines, sound bites, just a sealed folder in her hand and something sharper behind eyes. She laid the folder on table without a word. Inside accountant's sworn affidavit in 32-minute audio recording that could shatter a Senate seat. Her lead counsel opened the file, scanned first page, and stopped breathing for a moment. Recording was time-stamped, voice-verified, clean. A confession full and uncoached of falsified donation ledgers, shell company payments, and political kickbacks hidden under redevelopment code names. It was more than damning. Surgical. We drop this today. It'll be front-page news by noon. One aide, said voice half a whisper. Jasmine didn't move. No, she replied. We wait. The room fell quiet, confused. Her counsel looked up. Wait for what? She paced slowly, deliberately, eyes locked on nothing and everything at once. He filed a suit to bury me under headlines. The truth noise. If we go public now, it'll vanish into the chaos. Team pushed back. Pressure was mounting. Every hour, J.D. Vance controlling the narrative, playing victims, spinning lies on cable news, weaponizing the lawsuit to build sympathy and doubt. But Jasmine wasn't playing defense anymore. She was building something. Tapped the folder once softly. This doesn't get leaked, gets detonated. Her voice was calm, but it cut. The room stilled again because they knew what she meant. Wasn't going to waste this on a press release. Was waiting for the exact moment when cameras were rolling. Public was watching. J.D. Vance most sure he'd won. She wasn't just aiming to survive the lawsuit, was end him with his own silence caught on tape. For now, she returned the folder to her bag, zipped it shut, and sat down like nothing had changed. But everything had. Outside that room, the headline still screamed, "Radical Congresswoman Faces Defamation Suit." Only Jasmine knew the real story was waiting just beneath surface. And as sun rose over Capitol Hill, question hung in air like a match waiting to be struck. Why would she stay silent when the evidence could burn it all down? Invitation arrived wrapped in careful language, unity, conversation, common ground. J.D. Vance's office pitched it as a televised olive branch live on MSNBC. Town hall meant to heal division, featuring two public servants with different visions for America. But Jasmine knew better. It wasn't unity, was bait. She read the fine print twice, moderator a Vance friendly face, studio audience handpicked by network's producers, questions pre-approved, every camera angle, pause, light calibrated to paint her as the problem. JD wasn't calling for dialogue, he was staging a spectacle. Still, she said yes. No conditions, pre-notes, because Jasmine didn't need protection, she needed one opening. The night of town hall arrived under a sky that felt too calm. The studio gleamed with patriotic lighting, red, white, blue, filtered soft through glass. JD arrived first, shaking hands backstage, his team buzzing like they were about to drop a masterstroke. Jasmine entered second, quiet alone. No press team, entourage except one. She brought someone with her, but no one noticed yet. The opening questions were theater. JD spoke of data-driven development, cited rising property values, blame partisan grandstanding for housing crisis. The audience clapped at right beats. Moderator nodded like a metronome. Jasmine listened, hands folded still. When it was her turn, she didn't flinch. "Before I answer," said, eyes locked on JD, "I'd like to introduce someone who knows more about your development plans than either of us." Murmurs rolled across the room as a figure stepped out from wings. Accountant, gray windbreaker, pale face, hands tight around a folded sheet of paper. He walked slowly to the second mic. JD's eyes narrowed, his jaw set. The camera caught it all. "I worked for Vance Growth Partners," the man said, "was pressured to alter donor records, disguise redevelopment payouts as consulting fees. It wasn't policy, was payoff. Gasps, the kind you don't fake." He held up affidavit signed notarized. JD tried to interrupt, but the moderator raised a hand. Let him finish. Accountant's voice trembled, but didn't break. They called it demographic uplift, meant clearing people out, and I helped them do it. Jasmine stepped forward, her voice quiet but cutting. "This is what truth looks like. It doesn't always yell, sometimes walks in when you least expect it." JD stared ahead, frozen. No words, charts, exit. The room, once tilted in his favor, shifted like gravity had reversed. Producers whispered off camera. The moderator looked shaken. And for first time all night, JD didn't know what to do with his hands. Jasmine smirk. She gloat, just turned to the audience and let silence speak louder than any closing statement because the trap had closed. And now, man who built it was one struggling to breathe. What happens when ambusher becomes ambushed? Silence in room wasn't planned, but it was perfect, stretched past the usual television timing, talking points, point of rescue. J.D. Vance sat perfectly still under the studio lights as if any sudden movement might set something off. Across from him, Jasmine Crockett stood calm and grounded her voice low, steady. "Mr. Deshaun Mitchell, please read the line, Senator, signed under in Phase 3 contract." All eyes turned to man standing at her side. Deshawn stepped forward slowly. No script, lawyer whispering in his ear, just a folded contract, one hand and the other. Weight of everything he hadn't said until now. His voice didn't tremble. Not this time. Revitalization. Through selective dislocation, he read aloud his finger, pointing to the exact line highlighted in pale yellow, circled twice red pen. The words curled on page like a snake mid-strike. Font was small, tucked between harmless jargon, but now it hissed under the hot lights. Every syllable loaded like a bullet. The words landed hammer. Beat past, then two. JD didn't flinch, but the silence betrayed him. No notes, rebuttal, just echo of a phrase he had once signed without blinking, now rebounding through a room full of cameras and consequences. Deshawn held the paper up. This clause was added during final draft. I there. Internal version 7C revised after donor meetings. I was told to adjust the number's mass payout language and make it fit federal optics. I did was wrong. He looked JD in the eye now. You signed it knowingly. Didn't just approve the language. Pushed for it. Crowd didn't gasp. They have to. Everyone in that room felt it like the floor had just shifted under their feet. Moderator leaned forward, clearly rattled. Senator Vance, would you like to respond? JD reached for his mic, then stopped. Fingers hovered, lips parted slightly, but no words followed. He stared at the contract like was seeing it for first time. Couldn't deny it. Not this time, because wasn't hearsay. Was policy turned confession. Jasmine remained still, her eyes never leaving his. She said nothing more because knew silence, when used correctly, could speak louder than outrage. And this silence wasn't empty. It was loaded. Truth with nowhere left to hide. Deshawn continued softer now. That phrase, selective dislocation, it wasn't just a mistaken wording, was strategy to clear out certain zip codes, make room for preferred demographics. You called it revitalization, but we both know what really meant. The contract notarized and time-stamped now sat on moderator's desk. JD looked at it, but didn't touch it. He couldn't. The moderator whispered to a producer off camera, but no one cut commercial. The control room knew what was happening. This wasn't just good TV, collapse. Jasmine stepped forward once more. Her voice still didn't rise. I come here to throw punches. Came show receipts. And when those receipts reveal a pattern of eraser, displacement, weaponized poverty, then the people deserve to see who signed orders. JD still didn't speak because there was nothing left to say. And as the broadcast held final frame, Jasmine on one side, Deshawn holding proof, and a silent senator sinking beneath weight of his own ink, one question now hung heavier than any verdict. How do you deny what once endorsed in ink? The internet didn't wait for permission. Within minutes of town hall broadcast ending clip, Deshawn Mitchell reading J.D. Vance's signed phrase, revitalization through selective dislocation, lit up every corner of Twitter. It wasn't just retweeted, was weaponized. Memes, threads, screenshots. JD's frozen face beside the contract. Subtitles in bold yellow. He signed it. Then came the hashtags Vance evictions. She brought receipts, selective dislocation. By dawn, they were trending globally. Within hours, civil rights organizations released coordinated statements. The National Fair Housing Alliance demanded immediate investigation. The ACLU launched a petition calling for an ethics probe. Leaders from across the political spectrum couldn't look away. What had once been a quiet policy debate became racial flashpoint. This wasn't theoretical anymore. It was personal. Community organizers in Columbus, Detroit, and Atlanta posted their own receipts, zoning maps, eviction notices, rental buyout letters bearing familiar language. A mother from 43211 went live her car holding daughter's homework and crying into the camera. We weren't relocated, we're erased. Jasmine's office was flooded with emails, voicemail support, but Jasmine herself remained silent. No victory lap press tour. She let the country speak. J.D. Vance's team, however, moved fast and clumsily. His press secretary released a 3-paragraph statement calling the contract mischaracterization by hostile political actors. It blamed editing tricks and legal ambiguity, but didn't mention the signature or Deshaun Mitchell audio. Damage control turned into denial, and denial doesn't trend well. Cable networks ran side-by-side comparisons JD's Fox News interview just days earlier, claiming radicals were fabricating narratives and the raw footage of his stunned silence on stage. Editorials started using words like coordinated displacement paper genocide and policy laundering. In the background, calls for a Senate ethics investigation grew louder. The Congressional Black Caucus issued a formal letter to the Judiciary Committee. And by noon, a third senator, once considered Vance ally, went on record calling the evidence deeply troubling and racially charged. Political center was shifting. Jasmine, still no statement. She sat in her office, watching it all unfold, letting the country digest truth on its own terms. No grandstanding, just quiet resolve. Because sometimes the most powerful move isn't speaking, it's refusing to back down. And as reporters dug deeper into Vance's records on one question, now crawled its way every newsroom, hearing room, late-night whisper in Washington. What else is hiding his record, just waiting to surface? The backlash came like a storm with no clouds, sudden, loud, and merciless. Within 48 hours of the town hall, Bombshell Jasmine Crockett wasn't just trending. She was under fire. Conservative media launched a full-blown assault. Headlines screamed across morning broadcasts. Race-baiting congresswoman orchestrates public shaming. Crockett's radical agenda. Shame first facts later. One network ran a chyron for 6 hours straight. She used race to silence truth. They clipped her words out of context, slowed down voice in one video to make look unhinged. Another cut the town hall footage just before Deshaun Mitchell spoke, framing her as bullying a respected senator. Overnight truth got buried beneath production value and lies. They sold ratings. The attacks weren't just on her policy, were personal. Commentators dissected clothes, tone, attitude. One called angry and rehearsed, another accused of weaponizing race to shut down debate. A fringe outlet ran an old college photo with headline that read, "Radical Roots, the Jasmine they don't want you to see." Her inbox flooded, voicemail filled with static lace threats. Some callers didn't even speak, just breathed heavily, then hung up. In her DC office, staffers worked double shifts. Security was tightened, packages were screened. Social media feeds monitored by interns with tired eyes and stiff backs. But the smear kept growing. It was coordinated, funded, fed by talking points, recycled across platforms. A machine built not just to discredit, but erase. And still Jasmine said nothing. She showed up, head held high, no makeup change, softer tone, just the same resolve she carried into that town hall stage. But behind her eyes there was fire and exhaustion. Even allies began calling privately, urging to slow down, de-escalate, be strategic. She didn't answer because knew what this was. Not backlash, debate, but punishment for telling the truth too clearly. In her own district, local organizers held rallies defense. One sign read, "Facts aren't radical." Another, she spoke. Now they panic, but the machine kept spinning. A right-wing super PAC launched campaign ad against her within 72 hours. Slick graphics, eerie music, darkened photos of her face. They didn't need to prove wrong, just needed make look dangerous. Jasmine sat in office late one night scrolling through screenshots. Her staff collected. Most were hate, a few vile. One message, though, stopped her. It was from a woman in Detroit, single mother evicted 2 months ago. "They tried to make you the villain," message read, "but you're only one who ever said what we all feel." She stared at the screen, not crying, broken, just sharper, because this wasn't a new story. Was what happened when black women told the truth without asking permission. And now Smear Machine was roaring at full volume. But Jasmine wasn't backing down because one question pulsed louder than the noise. Hate, headlines trying to bury her. How do you fight a machine built silence and still find way be heard? At first, it was just background noise, a few kind messages buried under mountain of hate, quiet repost, comment thread that didn't spiral into filth. Jasmine noticed them but barely had time to breathe between legal briefings and security updates. The machine against her was loud, constant, relentless. But then something shifted. It began with a letter, handwritten. No return address. Just 4 sentences on crumpled piece of notebook paper. "I'm veteran. I've seen truth twisted before. What they're doing to you is called fear. That means hit the right nerve." Jasmine read it 3 times, then folded and slipped into her jacket pocket like armor. That week, voicemail box overflowed, but now not just with threats. A grandmother from Georgia voice-soft age said, "My grandson thinks you're the first politician who talks like he matters. Thank you for not backing down." Then came the truck driver from Iowa. "They say you're angry. Damn right. You should be. We all." By the weekend, it wasn't just individuals. Small town halls in Ohio and Pennsylvania released open letters defending her courage. A coalition of single mothers posted joint statement online. "If Jasmine Crockett's radical, then so are we." Even a few Republicans quietly at first broke ranks. One former state rep tweeted, "I don't like her politics, but she told the truth, and truth is no matter who says it." A Facebook video from retired auto worker named Carl went viral. Grizzled face, American flag in the background. "I've been lied to by both parties," he said into the camera. But that woman stood up and what no one else would. Maybe it's time we stopped yelling about left and right, started listening to the people getting bulldozed. It racked up 3.2 million views in 48 hours. Inside Jasmine's office, her staff created a folder labeled Unlikely Allies. They printed the letters, clipped comments, kept a running wall of photos, faces people the media never expected to care. Construction workers, clergy, former police officers. One ex-Marine sent a care package with note. "You don't know me, but I've got your 6. It was the visit from Harold Voss that struck deepest. He arrived unannounced. Jasmine hadn't seen him in nearly 5 years. He sat at her kitchen table, slow and heavy, his hands calloused by 60 years of defending the voiceless. He didn't say hello, just looked at her and said, "It's working, isn't it?" She blinked, unsure. He tapped her TV screen where pundits debated tone instead of evidence. "You're scaring them. That's why they're screaming louder." She sat beside him, quiet. He leaned in. "Listen to me. The truth doesn't shout. It just survives. That's job. You speak and then outlast fire. Next morning, Jasmine walked into Capitol with her head a little higher, because while enemies raised their voices, the country was beginning to raise its own. And somewhere beneath the noise, one question had begun to bloom in hearts of people who never thought they'd care. Can truth survive a firestorm if the people finally stand with it? Studio lights burned hotter than usual, cameras angled in from all sides. Fox News had promoted the segment like a heavyweight fight. Jasmine Crockett versus Pete Hegath. One chair was already occupied by a smirking host, the other empty, waiting for woman they called divisive. Jasmine walked in like she was stepping into a furnace. No cords, handlers, just calm face, folder under her arm, and truth writing silently on shoulders. She took seat without ceremony. Pete didn't offer a handshake. He went straight in. Congresswoman, why are you exploiting race to fuel your personal agenda? People say you're smearing a respected senator with half-baked claims. Jasmine didn't flinch. She met his stare and answered steady. What I brought to that town hall wasn't an opinion. It was a contract signed, dated with language so cold it doesn't need interpretation. Selective dislocation. She placed the paper gently on desk between them. Pete pressed again. But isn't that standard redevelopment phrasing? She leaned forward, eyes sharp. Would you sign a document that tears families from homes and call it standard because he did, I have the receipts? Audience stirred. A few leaned in. One man crossed his arms tighter but didn't look away. Pete tried to redirect. You've politicized this entire issue. Jasmine cut in, voice firm but low. You know what politicized it? The silence, money, targeted evictions masked as urban progress. This isn't about party lines. It's who gets to stay on the map and erased. There was a pause. Then something unexpected happened. Clap from somewhere in the back. Then another scattered, hesitant but real. Pete glanced toward the crowd, visibly thrown. His script rattled, smirk faded. Jasmine didn't smile. She let the moment sit. I come here to yell, came remind you that documents don't lie. People just pray no one reads them. The crowd quieted, but energy shifted. Even through cameras, you could feel it. Echo chamber had cracked just enough for truth to slip through. Pete cleared his throat, looked down at notes, but there was nothing left to throw. The producer cut early. They went break, but clip was already being clipped. Postage shared. Jasmine stood and walked off set without a backward glance. Behind her, the audience didn't boo. They stood quiet, unsure, but standing. What does it say when the truth pierces even loudest echo chamber? Leak didn't come from Congress, it a whistleblower or an aide with conscience. It came from journalists late night unannounced, no warning. Simple upload, one PDF, 97 pages long, no headline, just a title at the top, donor transactions, Vance redevelopment phase 13. It spread like fire through dry brush. The file showed everything: dates, dollar amounts, company names, private equity firms, and neighborhoods. Block after from zip codes already bulldozed or redeveloped. Every donor tied to J.D. Vance's PAC had one thing in common. They got richer every time a family was displaced. One entry showed $2.1 million consulting payout routed through a Nevada shell corp just 3 weeks after an entire housing row in 43211 was cleared. Another listed a bundle of donations from real estate groups, each marked with notes like post-clearance high-yield zone or worse, successfully emptied. It was all there, black and white receipts again. But this time, it wasn't just Jasmine waving them. The media jumped on it. Every network, desk, the story led hour, eviction for donations. J.D. Vance's housing empire exposed. Even conservative outlets couldn't look away. It wasn't just unethical, looked organized, deliberate. A pay-to-evict system with paper trail stretching back years. Jasmine didn't gloat. She need to. Let the documents speak. Her earlier warnings suddenly looked less like accusations and more prophecy. The same people who once called her divisive now used word preyant. Pundits who mocked her calm tone now replayed it like gospel. Moderate Republicans began to scatter. One senator quietly asked be removed from JD's joint fundraising committee. Another canceled a scheduled appearance with him. Behind closed doors, donors went silent. PR firms stopped returning calls, and the real Tell Vance's most loyal surrogate, a congressman from Tennessee, tweeted photo of his golden retriever and pretended politics didn't exist. Inside JD's camp, the tension boiled. Leaks turned inward. His own team didn't know who to trust. Legal spokesperson resigned within 24 hours. He canceled a Fox News segment due to illness. And on Capitol Hill, the sound in hallways changed. No more whispers of, "What if she's wrong?" Now it was, "What else is buried?" Jasmine returned to work the next day like it was any other. No victory speech, just a quiet, sharp press conference. She held up the donor document with a single sentence. Truth doesn't need megaphone, it just needs daylight. And as cameras flashed, former allies vanished into the shadows, one question now haunted every step J.D. Vance took. What does a man do when even his own allies start running? It didn't make front-page news, no dramatic statements, press conference, just a 6-line filing stamped at 7:42 a.m. Plaintiff hereby moves to voluntarily dismiss all claims. J.D. Vance's defamation lawsuit against Jasmine Crockett was dropped quietly, silently, like it had never existed. No apology, explanation, acknowledgement that the entire legal attack had been built on sand. But silence said enough. Inside Jasmine's legal office, no one celebrated. They expected this. The moment donor list leaked case was dead. You can't sue someone for defamation when the receipts are carved into public record. Lawsuit had never been about justice. It was fear, now over. But Jasmine wasn't done. Hours after the dismissal, her team filed a motion of their own, this time not in civil court, but Congress. A formal request for public oversight hearing into housing corruption tied to campaign finance. Attached to the motion, donor lists, signed contracts, audio from Deshaun Mitchell, and sworn affidavit 3 more former fund employees. She walked the documents up Capitol steps herself. No cameras, just purpose. Pressure shifted instantly. Ethics Committee blinked first. Then came Judiciary Subcommittee. Within 24 hours, hearings were under review. Journalists swarmed judiciary staffers in elevators, asking who else had seen those contracts. One congressional aide was overheard whispering, "If she pulls this off, won't just clear her name, she'll rewrite the playbook." JD's team tried to spin it, said they dropped the case focus on issues, but nobody bought it. Not after weeks of slander, trying to paint Jasmine as a radical. Now, all they had was smoke and courtroom just sprinted out of. The clip of Jasmine holding new motion outside Capitol went viral, her voice calm but unshakable. They wanted silence. Now we need transparency because the courtroom may be quiet, but people are watching, and they were viewers across the country. Those who had once doubted her now asked why no one else had brought this forward. It took a smear campaign to reveal systemic theft. Why signatures like selective dislocation, ever made it onto government-backed redevelopment deals. The court didn't deliver justice, but it opened a door and Jasmine stepped through it, not as defendant, but prosecutor armed with truth. Now the same halls that tried to crush her would be forced to echo back every name, number, family out for profit. And as the legal dust settled, one question thundered louder than any gavel. What happens when a courtroom stops protecting power and starts becoming a confession booth? It was late. The office had cleared. Noise outside faded, but Jasmine stayed behind, sorting through a stack of mail her team had left on the corner desk. Most it was routine briefs, circulars, a few anonymous hate notes sealed with sarcasm and bile. But then she saw it. A plain white envelope, no stamp, just her name written in pencil, uneven and slanted with a tiny heart sketched next to it. She opened it slowly. Inside was a folded piece of notebook paper lined, smudged and torn from a spiral with jagged edges. The purple ink had faded in places as if pen been running out. At top, a small heart drawn in uneven strokes, tilted like it had been added last minute. The handwriting was crooked letters, leaning left like they were afraid to stand up straight. No return address, last name, just truth raw and trembling. Hi, Miss Jasmine. My name is Ila. I'm 12. I live in Columbus now with my grandma. We're a shelter because the place we lived got torn down. Jasmine's hands froze mid-turn. Her chest tightened as she kept reading. My grandma said you went on TV and told the truth. She our names when nobody else did. Made the people who took our home listen for once. She said you're the reason we still believe someone cares. Then one final line written in all caps letters, crammed together like they were racing to be heard. Thank you for fighting her. The room felt still too still. Jasmine sat back in her chair, the paper lap, eyes blurring. She didn't sob, speak, cried the way people cry when weight becomes too much to carry alone, silent, full, and real. This wasn't a political win. It about hearings or headlines who lost their donors. It was about this. A 12-year-old girl writing from shelter trying to put faith into words on line paper to tell the woman TV that truth still mattered. Someone noticed. Jasmine folded the letter slowly and placed it in her desk drawer. Not for storage, but protection. Because in a world that chews people up speaking out, little letter was the only proof some stories still reached the people who needed them most. And as lights dimmed around her, one question wouldn't leave her mind. What if this isn't just politics, but life and death? The chamber was colder than usual, not in temperature, but silence. The air held weight like it knew what was about to be said would outlive the walls around it. Jasmine Crockett stood behind microphone fingers wrapped tightly around edges of her notes. Voice had carried through courtrooms, debates, town halls, but today it trembled. She wasn't afraid, was full, the gallery packed, reporters, staffers, survivors. A woman from Columbus sat in the third row holding photo of her demolished home. Jasmine saw her. She them all, but one seat stayed empty. Third chair from the right. J.D. Vance's nameplate still gleamed under light, untouched, unclaimed. He never returned. She took one breath and began. We've spent months uncovering what should never have been buried, she said. We found signatures that displaced families, donor trails soaked in silence, and contracts that called it selective dislocation, like communities were cluttered to be cleaned. Her voice wavered just once. She didn't stop. We talk about policy like it's math, but the numbers never included 12-year-old girl writing letters from a shelter, or the 82-year-old teacher whose porch became a courtroom, boy who said, They tore down my house for someone never lived here. Murmurs rippled through the room. She tightened her grip. They weren't evicted by chance. They were erased on purpose, and the man who profited most chose not to be here. She paused long enough for the silent sting. Power has many faces, but none of them should be allowed to vanish when questions get hard. No shouting, dramatics, just truth. Level, brutal, clear. She turned toward the committee. Some faces leaned in, others looked away. That told her everything. I'm not here to win votes. Remind this body and country that homes are not chess pieces, zip codes, battlefields, and people deserve more than being moved, renamed, and forgotten. One final breath. This is not vengeance. Repair. And if Chamber won't face what it allowed, the people will. Room stayed still. No applause, just breath. And the chair lit like a witness box. Jasmine stepped back, quiet, steady. The speech was over, but weight of her words still hovered in rafters. And as gavel struck to adjourn, one truth rang louder than silence J.D. Vance left behind. When power runs from truth, what's standing is justice with nothing to fear. The screen faded in no music, just silence, the slow hum of archived footage. Grainy clips hearings, families carrying boxes down broken steps, protest signs soaked in rain. Jasmine Crockett's voice layered softly beneath it all, not yelling, just speaking. Then the camera cut to present. A studio, clean, bright, national broadcast. One chair for the host, her. Jasmine sat in navy again. No script, talking points, just her framed against months of fire. The host leaned forward. After everything, lawsuits, threats, headlines, what made you keep going? Jasmine looked down for a second. Not from doubt, but memory. Then she spoke. Because someone had to. Her voice didn't shake, it rise, just landed. The montage played again. Accountant handing over contract, crowd standing on live television, letter from 12-year-old girl framed in corner of her desk. Then back to studio. Did you ever think it would end like this? The host asked. Jasmine exhaled. I didn't think about ending. Thought people still stuck in middle. When you walk through neighborhoods stripped to concrete and silence, it doesn't feel like policy. Feels loss. Another clip rolled her final hearing speech. JD's empty seat, the room frozen in truth. Host looked at her with a pause. You shook something loose in this country. What do hope happens next? Jasmine leaned forward now, her hands clasped. That someone else stands up. It doesn't take a contract with blood in the margins to make us care. That may be just people stop mistaking quiet for consent. Outside the studio, viewers watch from airports, break rooms, shelters. One man sat in his truck and replayed the answer twice. A teenager in Oakland texted clip to his civics teacher. A grandmother in Columbus turned up the volume and whispered, "That's her." Host's final question lingered. What did you learn through all of this? Jasmine's answer came without pause. That truth is slow, but it survives. And if you speak long enough, someone will hear it. Even if it's just one person, that's enough. The studio dimmed, screen faded, but her words didn't. And as broadcast closed with one last image, Jasmine walking alone down the Capitol steps, head high, sun behind her, one final question remained etched into the hearts of everyone who watched. Will be next to stand up? The sky over Columbus was soft and golden, kind of light that makes everything feel like a memory already forming. Jasmine Crockett stood on the edge of construction site, boots, gravel arms, folded gently across her chest. The zone once marked high yield for clearance was no longer empty. Steel beams rose where eviction notices once hung. The air didn't feel hollow anymore. It felt like breath had returned. Children ran past her, laughing, chasing each other between stacks of drywall and half-built courtyards. One boy held a toy hammer, pretending to build what men had once torn down. Jasmine smiled. Not wide, proud, just quiet, bittersweet. The kind of smile that carries every name you couldn't save, but honors the ones still can. She stepped forward, tracing the edge of new sidewalk. Her heels brushed corner a chalk drawing sun house, three stick figures holding hands. A little girl nearby looked up and waved. Jasmine waved back. Then she noticed it just behind the construction fence mounted on new community center wall. A laminated poster hand-drawn in crayon and marker. Rainbow House. Girl holding hands with her grandmother, and at the bottom in crooked purple letters, "Thank you, Miss Jasmine. Layla, age 12." Jasmine froze. For a second, the noise faded. Woman standing nearby, gray sweater, tired eyes, stepped forward. She didn't say a word, just placed her hand gently over heart and nodded. This was never about headlines or lawsuits even winning. It was this. Soil reclaimed, futures rewritten, dignity not just defended, but restored. The wind picked up, carrying distant sound of hammers and radios. Jasmine closed her eyes for a moment, letting it all wash over her. The hearings, broadcast, letter from Ela. It wasn't over, never really would be. But something had shifted and survived. As she turned to leave, her phone buzzed with another request for an interview. She ignored it. Some stories didn't need retelling, they just needed to be seen. And as the screen slowly faded black, narrator's voice returned, not loud, grand, just honest. You can sue a person, smear name, delay the hearing or cancel broadcast, but you can't sue a principal. And sure as hell, silence the truth. Sometimes justice doesn't arrive with a verdict. It begins someone quietly standing where others were erased and refusing to walk away. Truth, no matter how buried or denied, can still rise if someone has the courage not to back down. Have you ever asked yourself what would remain if you were the last one standing for truth? If this story stirred something in you, don't let it fade. Like, share, and subscribe to Mr. Truth Stories, where erased voices are heard and silence becomes justice. Tap the bell, because next story might not just uncover corruption, it remind us who we really are. What part of this story made you stop and feel something real? Leave a comment, share it forward. Let's not just remember, stand together. This dramatized story is inspired by real struggles and people. All characters' dialogue are fictionalized for commentary education. It is not intended to defame or mislead, but inspire reflection and civic awareness. Thanks for watching. The truth isn't over. It's just waiting for someone brave enough to carry it forward.